take a walk through Beaver Brook.
All
Okay.
right.
Okay. So just to position us a little bit, we are talking about a project in Eldred, New York, in Western Catskills, Delaware River Valley, in Sullivan County. It's a parcel that is surrounded because of this promontory on three sides by sort of a body of water that the Beaver Brook empties into, and it's on Beaver Brook Road. And this 10-acre property came for our client with an existing tiny home that they had the opportunity to stay in while we were going through this process. So they had a really good understanding of the land. They were already utilizing the land. They were already getting a sense of the rhythms of the place. So they had a real point of view on what they wanted to see when they started to build the house. So zooming out, just looking at the site a little bit, way later, after knowing that this house exists, I'm really stunned by the quality of this parcel, that it even existed. At that time, it was a very different time in the kind of land buying search of the Western Catskills. And looking at this, they really got this place for a song. Here you can see the small tiny home in the forest. Zooming out further, for the topography, we have kind of a high point or high side drop into the site, and then sort of a hollow through, and then it picks back up again. So everything in red is the same topo line. Here's our little tiny house. And from up at the tiny house level, you can start to see this in the winter, being able to see through the forest and see the water through the landscape. And down at the, I don't know what they call this body of water, the Beaver Brook Lake, or I'm not sure if it's still the Beaver Brook, but down at the water, they had started to build out. This is like a little pallet dock, but they started to build a little kayak launch for themselves and a way to utilize the body of water. And then looking back up at the tiny home. So the siting and a lot of the kind of strategy and placement of things are sort of already, it was largely there because of the tiny home placement, and that they had oriented that structure to kind of fit into how they were thinking about utilizing the landscape once they build a main home. So zooming out, looking at some site considerations, again, circling in red the existing tiny home, and then septic, future garage, existing sheds, some of our sight lines. There's an existing house relatively close, and how do we use the topography and utilize the kind of back of the house to block out the experience in the interior of the new home, sun path. And then looking here at building placement, that really building the house to run parallel with the topography and to open up, looking back at where that existing kind of cleared view was, and see where the trees are sort of thinnest coming down towards the water, where you'd be able to afford yourself a view of the water year round. A couple of different strategies here. And some other things we looked at, like small follies and decks and ways to activate the rest of the parcel. How would we kind of span some of these dips in the topography? How would we get out to the water? How would we create structures throughout the forest that created different view corridors that you weren't necessarily getting from the house? And we looked at some different ideas. Most of these kind of didn't make their way in, but they did give them a thought around kind of long-term planning for the parcel and how to take advantage of these kind of small promontories and peninsulas that they have. They have a lot of shoreline for a small 10-acre lot. Okay, so from there we started to look at bar-shaped homes. And this is sort of at a moment where we're able to start to pull up existing precedents, both looking at standards and then ways in which we were able to manipulate those standards to better match the use case of the client. And zooming out, the client's use case here, this was starting as a second home for them as a kind of empty nester couple, but they would host their college-age son here as well. And the idea is that they would sort of over time spend more time here and then eventually sell their house in suburban Jersey, outside of suburban New York, outside of New York City, and move here to Eldred, New York full time. So we're considering both what is the use case in the immediate term, and then what would it be really for the client's life. Again, looking some other bar-shaped home precedents, places that framed the forest view where the house was as much a kind of like linear view framing device as it was sort of a way to organize program. So our first cut here was looking at our medium bar kind of out of the box and starting to price that and looking at that as a two-bedroom, one bath, relatively efficient structure. And then how to expand it and look at an iteration where we'd add a loft. And then another version where we go a little bit longer along the topo lines. It's just spread out left to right, and look at sort of a big bar or a version of the kind of big bar as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, similar square footage as the lofted version, but aired out more, thinking thinking about this as being a kind of age-in-place home somewhere with single story living. And then, like always, compare these financially as early as possible to help inform our clients on not just the design decisions and not just the kind of layout decisions, but also pricing. What's the meaningful difference between these, and how can you pair a design perspective with the development math on these places and make an informed pocketbook decision what we're going to go further on documenting. It's important to remember that this is essentially our first or second meeting with this client, and we're looking at site, we're looking at floor plan, and we're looking at pricing for the house incredibly early in the sequence to be able to make kind of tight decisions on what we're going to spend our design time working on. Great. So then our client came back to us and said, love all of these, but I'm really focused on this example project that you had on your site. This is a project in Honesdale, New York, or Honesdale, Pennsylvania, which is right across the Delaware River, not too far from Eldred. This house has a slightly different setup where the diagram is a bedroom, living space, bedroom, but then a loft space with a full stair going up to that loft area overlooking the main room of the house. So that looks a lot like our big bar, but modified quite a bit. And it's nice that they had this reference that seemed pretty much directly in line with what they had in mind, and we're able to kind of like surface that as a design study without having to do all that much work to develop it further, and have them sort of agree, yeah, that's more the direction I want to go down. And because we had worked on something similarly, we had a very good sense of pricing and what the kind of executional requirements were going to be, and then started to develop the floor plan and the massing based on that format. So again, coming back to the site, and where would we place this longer form of a big bar? We're starting to go a little bit across the topography here to open up those views even more, and to create a little bit of drama on the right side of the house, where the deck picks up off of grade somewhat and ends up being a little bit of a treehouse experience on that side. So you enter at grade on the left side, walk through the house, and then you're flying a little bit on the right side once you come through to the deck. So here you can see kind of first version, entering in small bedroom, primary bath, and then up to the living kitchen dining space, and then up to the loft. This is feels a little flipped in orientation, but the water here and the view is to the south. And so you kind of enter in, and as you come through, see the kind of full sliding glass wall looking out through the forest, and then the primary bedroom slider, also with direct access to the deck, also with a view out and indirect sunlight, but view out to the water and that Beaver Brook down below. And then up in the loft, you see the loft space there on the right. You can see the house is really a lot more open towards the forest side and away from the neighbors. If you remember from the earlier site plan, the neighbors were relatively close. They're kind of closing down the house on that side. The house is also below where the house above where the neighbor is, maybe almost 10 feet. So they're kind of looking over the roof line of this house, but we kind of tightened up the window patterning and made sure that we were kind of creating privacy by utilizing the existing topography of the site. A couple quick sections. Again, you see the loft space up above, bedroom below, and then the primary bedroom with full height vaulted ceiling. Again, getting directly into pricing based on these figures. So then let's hop in, look at some of the real world imagery from the site once this moved from permitting into construction this is November of last year. So we're about 11 months ago when the foundation floor system starts to go in. Relatively light clearing. We also chose a spot on site that had already gone through some clearing. We needed to fell some additional trees for the septic field. A couple months later, we're framed up inside. I'll spare us from the video of a video, but it starts to feel like a real house. Got the full shell, the windows installed, and one of the kind of differences you see in this house from a lot of our houses is in the roof overhang. There's a kind of deeper overhang protecting the siding. It's sort of a sound building science practice, a little bit more of a traditional form, gives it sort of an alpine kind of sensation, a little bit different than sort of like a much more tight roof line that you might see in some of more Scandinavian roof lines. But I think it works really quite well here. Here's a good shot of that. You can see we have about a 1.5 to 2 foot overhang. That's a couple months later again, spring, skylights are in, the siding is up, Joe, what is our siding here?
We just have a hemlock siding that we did. It's like a pine tar stain. So there are like three coats of stain that was applied by the contractor to this, and a little bit in the weeds, but you sort of you finish all the boards individually before you put them on the house, just to make sure like any gaps in the siding are all the same color, and it leads to a really nice finish.
We are on the interior. There's the builder we chose to work with here is a Passive House certified builder. While this isn't a capital P passive house, there are a lot of building science ideas that we are both bringing to this in our documentation, and also that the contractor is quite committed to. And so it's a very high performance building overall. And see that in some of the taping and the Sega products that we're utilizing throughout. The kind of it's a heavily insulated shell that's incredibly tight. Here we are looking down from the loft, looking across to some of the mechanical attic space above the primary bathroom, and then through to the full height cathedral ceiling in the primary bedroom. Full staircase. I think a lot of times folks, when they think about what a loft is, a lot of like ladder access, or am I going to be kind of scurrying up there? A very standard staircase designed such that you're coming into the middle of the loft space and you're coming up into full head height. There's that corner moment in the primary bedroom. A little hard to make out here, but from the bed, you're essentially looking at the 270 degrees of water frontage that's going around from the Beaver Brook out there at the end of the property. Okay, spring is gone and summer of building has occurred. Standing seam metal roofing is on. Landscaping is going in. Hardscaping, French drains, gravel pathways. On the inside, we have millwork going in, white oak millwork from Lane 17, one of our cabinet providers and based out of Ohio. We have flooring down and have some of those same things you see in a lot of our projects, the kind of protection of view corridors that anytime you come into a space and you look left or you look right, you're very rarely looking at a dead end wall or at a door. You're looking all the way through the house, and kind of we're setting those views through the house as compositional moments and being very intentional around what it is that you're seeing when you're looking through to wherever that puncture is in the exterior wall. Here we are looking down and see some of the kind of taupey paint is going in. It's already up on the ceiling. Put that up first, then remove the scaffolding, and now they're kind of working on things back down on the ground level. Really beautiful cabinetry here. And then looking at some of the tile work and getting into the details of bringing a little bit of texture into this space and using some hand-fired and more aged materials that have some variation. While the building is incredibly sharp and sort of precise throughout, we're bringing in a little bit of texture, a little bit of kind of wabi-sabi moments here in our material palette to give some sense of craft. Love this little nook in the primary with closets and reading nook. Bathroom finishes moving along, and build up this deck in a cool way where this outdoor shower area, outdoor bench, a planter, and very integrated between the outdoor space and the indoor setting. And that kind of carries through when you look at some of the landscaping, the kind of large cut stones making their way down the hill. Again, the house is below grade of where you drive in, very integrated stone path working your way around the rear of the house. This will be the final group we go through, and getting into sort of the final moments here where appliances are going in, lighting is in, we're starting to call out punch list items, very specific review of items. And I think it's important for our clients or any prospective clients out there to recognize that on all of our projects, we're not sort of going through the design exercise, handing it off to a contractor and saying good luck. We are entering into an owner's rep phase or during construction. We're there at all of these moments on the ground at all these key milestones of construction, at siting, at initial excavation, at foundations, at framing, at mechanical, electrical, plumbing rough in, all the way through to moments like this where we're calling out kind of specific install on just like how well are individual cabinets sliding, and are there any dings that need to be repaired. Just really getting into the nitty gritty, not just for life safety issues, but also to make sure that what we've designed for and what's been specified and what we've communicated during the design process is in fact what's actually happening here along the way, and that our build teams are staying true to the decisions that us and our clients have made throughout the design sequence. Very detailed moments. Looks here like, what are we calling out here? Spencer, I think this is your photo. We're calling out
Unfinished tile edge.
Larger set of callouts that there's just a bunch of blue tape talking about grout work.
So like things that just needed to be have another passive grout on them, you'll
Yeah.
see there's like bubbles or things like that.
Yep. Very detailed.
I add them all.
No, it's great. I mean, I think that so many of these projects, you see them if you're a client or you're a prospect and you're seeing them as early stages sort of a rendering, and it can often be like design intent seen from an aerial image that is rendered from 300 feet above the ground. Couldn't be more zoomed out, but ultimately every project ends in this at this point, which is really looking at it closely and figuring out how, when the keys are handed over, it's what the client had in mind.
Great.
Fix that. So that's in Beaver Brook, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, based on a big bar in Eldred, New York, in the Western Catskills, and it's on its final legs. And we're excited to share final photos of this one and to have our clients move in full time and start to build the next chapter of their life in the house.